Hi, I'm Lira. This is not just my story, but a journey of love, sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption. A journey where family ties were tested, where self-respect was shattered, and where a secret buried in the folds of trust changed everything. If you stay with me until the end, you will see how love and revenge can sometimes walk hand in hand, and how one decision can alter the path of two lives forever. When I was just a child, I learned quickly that family is not only about sharing a home or sharing a last name. It is about sacrifice. My parents left this world far too soon, leaving me and my older brother Adrian to fend for ourselves. He was only a teenager back then, full of dreams and ambitions, while I was younger, still learning how the world worked. I remember standing in the small kitchen of our old house, my hands covered in flour, trying to make something as simple as bread because we didn't have enough money for proper meals. Adrian was always talking about his dreams, how he wanted to go to college, how he wanted to build a career, and how one day he would give me a better life. And I believed him. I believed in him with all my heart. As we grew older, the responsibility of keeping us afloat somehow fell on me. I started working part-time while still going to school. Cleaning houses, fixing small things around the neighborhood, sometimes even taking on jobs that required more strength than I had, but I never stopped. Every coin I saved went into a fund for Adrian. I wanted him to study, to build the future he deserved. No one knew that the money for his education came from my endless hours of labor. He thought it was just financial aid or maybe some miracle scholarship. But the truth was that I was the silent force behind his every success. And I kept it that way because love, I thought, meant giving without expecting anything in return. But life has a cruel way of testing our beliefs. By the time Adrian got accepted into college, I had already sacrificed my chance to study further. I settled for a technical job, one that paid bills but left little room for dreams. I'll study later, I kept telling myself. Right now, his future matters more. I kept track of his progress through calls and occasional visits. He sounded happy, excited, and ambitious. I smiled every time I heard his voice. It felt like all my sacrifices were finally worth it. But deep inside, there was always a quiet ache. An ache of lost opportunities, of dreams that I had tucked away. Still, I chose silence. I chose to believe in love, in family, in the thought that someday Adrian would understand everything I did for him. I didn't know then how wrong I was. If you are enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps stories like these coming. As years passed, Adrian became more distant. He was busy with his new world, friends, classes, parties, and a lifestyle that felt too polished compared to mine. I didn't mind, or at least I pretended not to. After all, he was living the life I had dreamed for him. But one Thanksgiving evening would change everything. A moment so sharp, so humiliating, that it would pierce through every layer of love and sacrifice I had given. And that was where the real story began. Thanksgiving, a day that was supposed to be about gratitude, love, and family. For most people, it's a time when laughter fills the dining room, the aroma of roasted turkey spreads warmth in every corner, and memories are created around a table where no one feels left out. For me, that Thanksgiving started the same way, but ended in a way I could never have imagined. I had been preparing for weeks. Even though I didn't have much, I poured my heart into making the day special. I cooked, cleaned, decorated, and set the table with the little things I had saved up for. I told myself, this year Adrian will notice. He will finally appreciate everything I've done. When Adrian walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked so polished, so different from the boy I had raised after our parents died. His expensive jacket, his confident stride, the way he spoke to his friends on the phone, it was all so unfamiliar. He had become someone I didn't know anymore. I smiled anyway, rushing to greet him. "Welcome home, Adrian." He barely nodded. "Yeah, thanks. Is everyone here already?" That small dismissal should have been my warning. But my heart, so used to loving without condition, ignored the sting. The table was full that night. Relatives, cousins, neighbors, everyone chatting, laughing, and catching up. I sat quietly, serving dishes, making sure everyone had what they needed. Felt good to see them happy. That was always enough for me. Or so I thought. As the night wore on, conversations turned toward success, careers, and futures. Someone asked Adrian about college. His face lit up as he described his classes, his professors, his big plans for the future. I watched him with pride. This was the dream I had built for him with my own 2 hands. But then it happened. One of the relatives turned to me and asked, "And what about you, Lira? What are you doing these days?" I smiled shyly. "I work as a technician. It's a simple job, but it keeps things steady." Before I could even finish, Adrian laughed. He actually laughed. Loud enough for the whole table to notice. "Come on," he said, shaking his head. "She's just a tech. Nothing big. She fixes wires, machines, that kind of stuff. Honestly, not much to brag about." The room fell silent. His words hung in the air like poison. My cheeks burned, and I felt everyone's eyes on me. Just a tech. Those 3 words sliced through me like a blade. The same brother for whom I had given up my own education, my own dreams, my youth. He reduced me to just a tech in front of everyone. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled as I picked up my fork. The food on my plate blurred, my chest heavy with humiliation. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground beneath me to swallow me whole. But Adrian wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I mean, it's fine for her, you know. Not everyone can handle real academic work. Some people are just meant for basic stuff." Laughter rippled across the table. Some out of awkwardness, some out of genuine amusement. My heart cracked a little more with every chuckle. I looked at Adrian, my brother, the boy I once held when he cried at night, the boy I worked endless hours for, the boy I believed in. I looked at him and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. It wasn't just humiliation, it was betrayal. That night, as I cleared the plates and wiped the table, I felt invisible. No one asked if I was okay. No one defended me. And Adrian? He was too busy checking his phone, bragging about the internship he wanted, to even notice that he had shattered me. I lay awake for hours after everyone left. The words echoed in my head, louder than the silence of my empty room. "She's just a tech." But what Adrian didn't know was that I wasn't just a tech. I was the backbone of his entire education, the silent force behind his so-called success. And I held a secret, one that could change everything. Because hidden in the dusty files of our parents' trust fund was a clause that gave me control. A clause that could end his college dreams in an instant. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every sacrifice, every hour of work, every dream I had buried for him. The more I thought, the more my humiliation turned into fire. A fire that would no longer burn quietly inside me. Thanksgiving had ended in betrayal, but it had also awakened something in me. And as the first light of dawn crept through my window, I whispered to myself, "Enough." If you're still with me and this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps me keep telling stories like this one. The world saw me as just a tech. Adrian saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. But he was about to learn the truth. Because when you build your dreams on someone else's sacrifice, you should never forget. Sometimes that person holds the power to take it all away. And I was done staying silent. The night after Thanksgiving was unlike any other. The laughter from the dining table still echoed in my ears. not as a memory but as a haunting reminder of humiliation. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see Adrian's smug smile, the way his words cut through me, the way the others had laughed. The food I had prepared with so much love had turned to ashes in my mouth, and the pride I once held for him had crumbled into dust. I tossed and turned in bed, staring at the ceiling. My chest felt heavy, as if a stone had been placed on it. I thought of my parents, the sacrifices they made, the hopes they had for us. I thought of the promise I had made silently when they left this world, that I would take care of Adrian, no matter what. And I had kept that promise. Every single day. Every coin I earned, every dream I let slip away, every moment I could have claimed for myself, I gave to him. I was the foundation of his success. And yet, to him, I was nothing more than just a tech. The anger burned so hot in me that I could no longer lie still. I got out of bed and went to the old wooden chest at the corner of my room. Inside, neatly stacked, were papers and folders I had kept since my parents' passing. Bills, certificates, bank documents, and the trust fund file. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, but the contents inside were the blueprint of Adrian's future. I had opened it many times before, mostly to reassure myself that his college fund was intact. But this time I was searching for something else. I sat at my desk, switched on the small lamp, and began to read. Line after line, page after page, legal jargon blurred in front of my eyes until, there it was. A section I had overlooked before. A clause tucked neatly into the document, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. My father had been meticulous when he set it up, perhaps knowing that someday this safeguard would be necessary. It read, "In the event that the beneficiary fails to uphold the values of family respect, gratitude, and integrity as outlined by the trustee retains full authority to suspend or revoke all benefits of the fund, either temporarily or permanently." And who was the trustee? Me. My breath caught in my throat. My hands shook as I traced the words over and over again. The very values that Adrian had spat upon in front of our family. Respect, gratitude, integrity. Those were the conditions of his support. And I held the key. For the first time in years I felt a surge of power. Not the kind of power that destroys, but the kind that restores balance. I sat back in my chair, memories flooding my mind. The nights I stayed up late working extra shifts. The mornings I skipped breakfast so Adrian could have a proper lunch. The times I stitched my old clothes just so I could save money for his textbooks. The countless sacrifices. Unseen, unacknowledged, unappreciated. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of realization. I had given everything, and he had given me nothing in return. Not even respect. And now, destiny had placed the choice in my hands. I could let him continue, pretending as if nothing had happened, watching him rise higher and higher while I faded further into the background. Or I could act. I could use the very clause my father had written, the clause that honored the values Adrian had betrayed, and show him the cost of arrogance. I closed my eyes and imagined Adrian's face when he would find out. Shock, disbelief, maybe even anger. But beneath all of that I hoped, just maybe, he would finally see me. See the sister who had given up everything for him. See the love, the sacrifice, the truth. My heart battled my mind. Love whispered, "Forgive him. He is young, he will learn." But my wounded pride screamed louder. "No more. You deserve respect. You deserve to be seen." I sat there until the early hours of dawn, the trust file open before me, the words of the clause etched into my heart. The decision was heavy, but the choice was clear. I picked up a pen, my hand steady now, and signed the order to suspend the fund. In that single stroke of ink, years of silence, sacrifice, and betrayal transformed into a quiet form of justice. I placed the papers back into the folder, closed it, and locked it away. My chest felt lighter, though my heart still ached. I wasn't destroying his future. I was teaching him the value of the past. When I finally lay back in bed, exhaustion washed over me. But this time sleep came easily. Because for once, I wasn't just Adrian's shadow. I wasn't just a sister who sacrificed endlessly. I was Lira, the trustee, the protector of our parents' values, the one who would no longer stay silent. And soon, Adrian would learn that love without respect cannot last forever. The stage was set. Adrian didn't know it yet, but the world he had taken for granted was about to crumble. And I, the sister he dismissed as just a tech, was about to show him the true cost of arrogance. The first ripple of change came sooner than I expected. It was only a week after Thanksgiving when Adrian called me. His voice carried a tone I hadn't heard before, shaken, uncertain. "Hey, Lira. Something's wrong with the fund. The tuition payment bounced. I don't understand." I held the phone tightly, my heart pounding, but I kept my voice calm. "Maybe you should check with the administration. Sometimes there are delays." There was silence on the other end. He wasn't convinced, but he didn't press further. Days later another call came. This time, his voice cracked with frustration. "They said the trust isn't releasing the funds anymore. Did you know anything about this?" "'Cause I don't understand why this is happening." I could almost see his face, pale with disbelief. His arrogance slipping away bit by bit. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Adrian, maybe it's time you start figuring things out for yourself." He exploded. "Are you kidding me? I've worked too hard for this. I can't just lose my education because of some stupid technical issue. You don't know what it's like. College isn't cheap. I need that money, Lira. I deserve it." His words stung, but not in the way they used to. This time, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Deserve. Did he really believe he was entitled to everything, when every brick of his future had been laid with my sacrifices? "I'm sorry, Adrian," I said softly, "but sometimes the world doesn't give us what we think we deserve. Sometimes we have to earn it." He hung up on me. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as the cracks in his perfect life began to widen. The confident brother who once bragged at Thanksgiving was now struggling to keep his head above water. He borrowed money from friends, tried to pick up part-time jobs that clashed with his classes, and slowly, the shine of arrogance began to fade. The whispers reached me through relatives and acquaintances. Adrian was falling behind in his classes. He missed assignments. He looked exhausted. His friends, the ones who had laughed with him at my expense, started drifting away when he could no longer afford to join their outings. It was painful to watch, but necessary. I wasn't cruel enough to take joy in his suffering, but I couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice was being served. He had built his pride on the illusion that he had done everything on his own, and now the illusion was collapsing. One evening I got another call. This time his voice wasn't angry. It was tired, defeated. "Lira," he said quietly, "I don't know what to do anymore. I've applied for financial aid, but it's not enough. I'm working nights, and I'm still short on tuition. I might have to drop out." I sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing against me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the arrogance would break, and the truth would finally surface. "Adrian," I whispered, "do you remember what you said to me at Thanksgiving?" He hesitated. "Lira, I didn't mean it. I was just showing off. I wasn't thinking." "No," I said firmly. "You were thinking. You believed it. You believed I was nothing but just a tech. You laughed at me in front of everyone, as if I hadn't given up everything for you." His breath caught. "What do you mean, given up everything?" The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. And then, slowly, I told him. I told him about the long nights I had worked, the jobs I had taken, the dreams I had buried. I told him about the meals I skipped, the clothes I patched, the sacrifices no one else had ever seen. I told him that the scholarship he believed was his lucky break was nothing but the money I had funneled into the trust through my own sweat and pain. When I finished, the phone was silent. Lira. His voice was hoarse, trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because love doesn't keep score, I answered softly. But respect does. And when you humiliated me, when you dismissed everything I am, that was the moment I realized love alone wasn't enough. For the first time in years, my brother had nothing to say. No excuses, no arrogance. Just silence. Weeks turned into months. Adrian managed to scrape by for a while, but the weight of his reality grew heavier. He had to cut back on classes, and eventually, he had no choice but to withdraw from the semester. I heard the gossip from distant relatives. They said Adrian had wasted his opportunity, that he had been careless. They whispered about how his pride had gotten in the way. But I knew the truth. This wasn't destruction, it was correction. Adrian needed to fall, not because I wanted him broken, but because only through falling could he learn how high he had been lifted by someone else's hands. And slowly, I began to see signs of change. He stopped calling me with anger. He started asking how I was doing, even if the conversations were brief and awkward. He sounded humbled, smaller somehow. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't redemption. But it was a beginning. One rainy afternoon, as I sat by the window fixing an old lamp, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, there stood Adrian, drenched from the storm, his eyes red and swollen. He looked nothing like the arrogant boy from Thanksgiving. He looked like the brother I once knew, the one who had dreams in his eyes and fear in his heart after our parents died. Without a word, he stepped inside. He stood there in my small living room, shifting nervously. Finally, he said, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I needed to see you." I didn't answer. I simply handed him a towel. He took it with trembling hands. That night, as he sat at my table, the same table where I had once eaten in silence after his cruel words, I realized the fall of arrogance was complete. Adrian had been stripped of the illusions he wore like armor. Now, standing before me, was just a man, broken and searching for a way to make things right. And though my heart still carried the scars of his betrayal, I also knew this. Every fall carries the seed of redemption. But whether Adrian would find his way to redemption, that was still to be seen. The storm outside that night mirrored the storm inside Adrian's heart. As he sat at my small dining table, dripping rainwater onto the floor, I saw the weight of defeat in his eyes. The same brother who once carried himself with arrogance, who once laughed at me in front of everyone, now sat in silence. His pride shattered, his dreams paused, and his illusions gone. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the soft patter of rain against the window. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. His voice was low, heavy. "I didn't know," he whispered, his gaze fixed on the table. "I didn't know everything you did for me. All those years. All those sacrifices. I thought the money just came from the trust. I thought it was Dad and Mom who made it happen." I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the sting of old wounds. It was Mom and Dad's trust, yes. But it was empty after a few years. Someone had to fill it again. Someone had to make sure you never worried about tuition, books, or rent. That someone was me. He looked up, eyes wide with guilt. "You gave up everything for me, and I..." His voice cracked. "I stood in front of everyone and made you feel small." The pain in his voice was real, but so was the pain in my heart. I took a deep breath. "Adrian, do you remember the night after Mom and Dad died? You cried yourself to sleep in my lap, saying you didn't know how to live without them. That night I made a promise to myself. I promised I would take care of you, no matter what it took, no matter what I had to give up. Because that's what family does." He nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. But promises, I continued, my voice firm, don't mean you get to disrespect the person who keeps them. Love without respect is meaningless. Do you understand? His shoulders slumped. He whispered, yes, I understand. For the next hour, we talked like we hadn't talked in years. I told him everything I had hidden. The long nights at work, the aching hands, the lonely holidays I spent without celebrating because I was too tired. I told him about the jobs no one else wanted, the insults I endured just to make sure he had what he needed. Every word seemed to cut deeper into him. He sat in silence, sometimes shaking his head, sometimes covering his face with his hands. It was as if each revelation peeled away another layer of his pride, leaving only regret behind. When I finished, the room was quiet again. Adrian finally spoke, his voice breaking. I don't know how to make it right. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. And I don't know how to forgive myself for how I treated you. I looked at him, my chest heavy with conflicting emotions. You don't need to repay me, Adrian, I said softly. That's not why I did it. I did it because I loved you. But you do need to learn. You need to respect me, respect others, and respect yourself. That's the only way you can honor what I gave up for you. He nodded, wiping his tears. I will, he said. I promise I will. The weeks that followed were not easy for him. Without the trust fund, Adrian had to start from scratch. He worked long hours, took smaller classes, and lived with far less than he was used to. The arrogance that once defined him was replaced with humility. He no longer bragged about his achievements. Instead, he spoke about his struggles, about the lessons he was learning. Slowly, I saw a change. He began visiting me more often, sometimes just to sit in silence, sometimes to help fix something in the house. Once he brought groceries, saying shyly, I thought you could use these. Another time, he surprised me by repairing the old fence outside, a job I had been putting off for months. It wasn't the groceries or the fence that mattered. It was the fact that he was trying. For the first time in years, he was giving something back. And with every small act, the bitterness in my heart softened, little by little. One evening, as we sat together drinking tea, Adrian looked at me and said, Lira, I finally understand. I raised an eyebrow. Understand what? He took a deep breath. That love without respect is empty. That sacrifice without acknowledgement is cruel. And that arrogance destroys the very people who hold you up. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. I used to think success was mine alone, he continued. That I was the one climbing the mountain. But the truth is, you were the one holding the ladder the whole time. And I kicked it without realizing you could pull it away. I see that now. And I'll never forget it. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from relief. Maybe my revenge had worked. Not by destroying him, but by teaching him. By showing him that his arrogance had consequences. And that respect was the foundation of love. That night, as Adrian left my house, he turned at the door and said something I never thought I'd hear. Thank you, Lira, for everything. I don't deserve you, but I'll spend my life trying to be a brother worthy of you. The words lingered long after he was gone, and for the first time in years I felt a sense of peace. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about realization, his and mine. I realized I didn't need to keep sacrificing endlessly without recognition. And Adrian realized that the love he had taken for granted was the very thing that had kept him alive. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they no longer burned. Instead, they became reminders of my strength, of my worth, of the truth that love must be paired with respect to survive. And as I watched the stars outside my window that night, I whispered to myself, this is not the end. This is the beginning of something new. The days that followed felt like a quiet dawn after a long storm. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight. Bills still had to be paid, work was still exhausting, and Adrian still stumbled on his new path. But something fundamental had shifted between us. For the first time in years, my little brother didn't feel like a stranger. Adrian began showing up at my workplace. He'd wait outside the small repair shop where I worked, holding 2 cups of coffee, one always just the way I liked it. Strong, no sugar, just a touch of milk. At first I brushed it off, telling him he didn't need to hover, but deep down it warmed my heart. One afternoon, as I fixed a customer's broken generator, Adrian quietly helped by handing me tools, watching every move with an attentiveness I'd never seen in him before. "You know," he said after a long silence, "I used to think this kind of work was beneath me. But watching you, it's not just work. It's skill, patience, dedication. And I realize now, without you, I wouldn't even know how to survive in the real world." I looked up at him, a smudge of grease on my cheek. His sincerity startled me. It wasn't the old Adrian who spoke just to impress. This was someone humbled, someone learning. And for the first time I believed him. Meanwhile, Adrian's new life wasn't easy. Without the trust fund and my constant financial support, he had to take a part-time job at a cafe near campus. At first, he hated it, the long hours, the rude customers, the low pay. But soon I noticed something changing in him. He started to tell stories about the people he met. The single mother who came in every morning with 2 kids, the old man who ordered the same coffee every evening just to chat with someone, the college students pulling all-nighters. He began to see the world beyond his textbooks and lectures, beyond his ambitions. Humility had entered his life, and with it, a new kind of strength. One evening, after closing the shop, Adrian walked me home. The streetlights flickered softly, and the air was cool with the promise of spring. "Lira," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "What do you want?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've spent your whole life making sure I had what I needed. But what about you? What are your dreams? What do you want for yourself?" The question stunned me. For years no one had asked me that. I had almost forgotten I was allowed to dream. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I'd like to open my own workshop. Place where I'm not just fixing things for others but teaching kids, giving them skills, giving them hope. Something small but mine." Adrian stopped walking. His eyes shone with determination. "Then that's what we'll do," he said firmly. "I'll help you. Every step of the way." I wanted to protest, to remind him of his own struggles, but I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Sincerity without arrogance. And I realized this wasn't pity. This was his way of giving back. For the first time I allowed myself to believe it could happen. Months passed, and together we slowly built toward that dream. Adrian worked extra shifts at the cafe, saved what little he could, and surprised me one day with a small envelope. Inside was enough to rent a tiny workshop space. "I know it's not much," he said nervously, "but it's a start." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him. That moment wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about acknowledgement, about finally being seen. The workshop opened quietly, without fanfare. Just a small sign, a few tools, and the 2 of us working side by side. At first, customers trickled in slowly, but soon word spread. People trusted me not just because of my skill but because of the way I treated them, with patience, with honesty, with care. And sometimes when kids wandered in, curious about the machines, I let them stay, teaching them how to fix simple things. Their eyes lit up with excitement, and I felt something inside me heal. I wasn't just a tech. I was a teacher, a builder, a dreamer. And now the world could see it too. Adrian never stopped studying, but his approach to life changed completely. He was no longer obsessed with prestige or wealth. He worked hard, respected others, and carried gratitude wherever he went. One evening, as we closed the workshop together, Adrian looked around with a quiet smile. You know, he said, for the longest time I thought revenge was about winning, about crushing someone who hurt you. But what you did, Lira, you didn't destroy me. You made me see. And that's more powerful than anything else. I looked at him, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't quite name. It wasn't easy, Adrian. Took everything in me to hold back. But maybe this was what we both needed. You needed to learn, and I needed to remember my own worth. He nodded. And now we both get to start again. As I watched him lock the door to our little workshop, I realized something profound. Revenge had started this journey, but redemption had ended it. Because true revenge isn't just about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's about opening their eyes, forcing them to face the truth, and then watching as they grow into someone better. Adrian wasn't the arrogant boy he once was. He was my brother again, the brother I had once promised to protect, the brother who now promised to stand beside me. And for the first time in a long, long time I felt at peace. The stars shone brightly that night, and as we walked home together side by side, I whispered to myself, this is what respect looks like. This is what love feels like. This is the life I deserve.